Good evening, I'm Darlene Arden, and welcome to Creatively Speaking. My guest this evening is author C.J. West. C.J. embraces social networking and keeps in touch with readers on MySpace, Goodreads, and Facebook.
Thank you so much for having me today, Darlene.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you here. Tell me that with The Demon Who Waits, and we're not going to give away the whole story because I want people to buy your books. What I find fascinating is in his search for redemption, exactly how he goes about finding hell, literally hell. I mean, people talk about hell on earth, but this guy has a vision of God and another vision of a place with monsters. Where did this come from, CJ?
I spent a lot of time researching heaven and hell and our images of heaven and hell and theological perspectives. I did a lot of work with the Reverend from the church that I grew up in, understanding different religious perspectives on redemption. And he helped me quite a bit, actually, with understanding how, if Randy went to him, how he would help him and counsel him and help him to move along. So I did a lot of research on those images, and I really worked hard. I wanted those images to hit home and help us really feel that we're in his place working along with Randy to earn forgiveness.
Which is really interesting. Nobody ever touches on that topic.
Yeah, you know, the book started as an experiment for me. People hated Randy. I saw him as someone who was justified, but some of my most determined readers, some of my biggest fans wanted him murdered, they wanted him in prison, they wanted terrible things to happen to him. They didn't see the justification that I saw.
I saw the justification. I had no problem with that.
And, you know, one of the things that I really worked into his character was people who were kind to him or people who were not related to the scandal. He treated very, very well. He was, you know, the kind of person who sees the maid working in the corner and is kind and helpful and gracious. But to the people who had harmed him, he was, you know, violent and
Which is
vengeful.
understandable.
Right. So what I wanted to do with The Demon Who Waits was help people to sort of live through his humanness and his coming to terms with what he had done and trying to get back to that person that he was when he was 13 years old in that barn.
What I found interesting was, and I really don't want to give this away, it does give you nightmares. It's wonderfully written.
Thank you.
The demons, literally the demons that he sees eating flesh. I mean, that was pretty disgusting. It's going to make a great movie.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've had a couple of comments, you know, Sin and Vengeance too. There are some scenes that are very intense, and I think we write what we enjoy seeing. And I really wanted people to think about, you know, the demons and our vision of there are consequences for the things that we do. Even if we get away with things in this world, there are consequences for the things that we do. And I also touched upon different ideas of the afterlife from different perspectives and trying to give various points of view on those things for people to sort of consider as they go through their daily life, hopefully.
Oh, it's fascinating. Just intriguing stuff that you were able to bring this so vividly to life. So nauseatingly vividly to life in some cases. I mean, people who love thrillers are really, and somewhat, almost science fiction, but, you know, because you've gone to this place that has only been in people's heads.
Right.
And you've created it basically on paper.
Right. Actually, one of the things that we're doing, coming up in a couple of weeks, we're going to Westport Rivers Winery, which is, it's a real winery in Westport, Massachusetts, that I set Sin and Vengeance in.
Oh, really?
And the reason I did that was when I was doing my research on winemaking. I wasn't a winemaking expert when I started, but I think
you are now.
Well, people have told me, people have expected that I was when they've talked to me about the book. But Rob Russell, one of the guys who works at the winery, really taught me a ton, and I was really appreciative of all the time he spent with me. He gave me some great research materials. So we're taking some fans back. We're going to tour the winery. It's going to be sort of a fun thing. We're going to be able to...
Oh, what a cool thing to do.
I'll be able to talk about the things that happened in the book, and Rob will be able to talk about how the winery does its operations and the things specific to winemaking and grape growing.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Why a winery? Why did you set it there?
You know, I was looking for an occupation for Charlie Marston, my hero, and I was talking to some folks, and they suggested this winery was undiscovered and they made fantastic wines, and they were very local. And I thought, what a great occupation for my hero. You know, son of a winemaking family, and he's actually a football player. He's somewhat of a reluctant winemaker, but you know, it's a beautiful place to visit, and it was surprising for me going into the processing room how huge the operation is on the inside. You don't really see. I mean, they have these fermentation tanks that are, you know, 15, 20 feet high and 4 feet in diameter. It's a huge operation.
Wow.
And it doesn't look that way from the outside, so I wanted to sort of bring that out to folks and let them sort of see that.
What a great, unusual thing to do. When you were writing some of these scenes, were you thinking film? Was that ever on your mind?
No, you know, it wasn't at first. I think maybe that's the way I think. I'm very visual. But one of the things I do is I visit book groups for my books. And one of the things that came out over and over again was people would say, I can picture this actor or that actor in the film, and I can picture this on screen. It'd be so great. And people have said the same thing about A Demon Awaits too. I think it's just part of, you know, the way I write and the way I think.
Do you have an actor in mind when you're writing? Is there somebody who looks like this character, or does this character look like you?
Well, I don't have an actor in mind. I've gotten a lot of good writing advice from people online and from books, etc. I always have a character in mind. I do a history. I do about a 4-page history on every character, which is sort of bulleted. You know, if you ask me about my character, I can tell you what they like to eat, where they go, what kind of car they drive.
What a good actor will do when approaching a role.
Right, and I also get a picture from somewhere, from a magazine or wherever. So it's interesting that when you look at a photograph over time, you start to assign feelings and experiences to that photograph. And I really feel like these people are real to me after working with them for a year and looking at that picture.
Do you find that they're talking to you, that suddenly you're going one place? I've heard so many authors say, fiction, not nonfiction.
Right. Hopefully not nonfiction.
No, not. I can tell you from my point of view as a nonfiction author, we don't hear voices. But do you find that you're almost channeling the character, that the character is doing things you hadn't anticipated?
If that happens, usually I feel like I'm in trouble.
Okay.
I had that happen at one point during Sin and Vengeance, where my writing sort of came to a stop. And what I did, I talked to some folks, and one of the things I learned about was maximum capacity, which is everyone needs to act to the best of their ability. And if someone's not doing that, the story just doesn't ring true. And one of the things that I'll do is I'll stop and I'll look at the story from everyone's perspective and see, you know, what's dragging me down here? Who's not pulling their weight? And it's a complex thing because you're writing often from 6 or 7 different perspectives and 6 sets of history and 6 sets of motivation.
How do you keep that straight?
It's difficult. You know, one of the things I do is I spend a lot of time plotting up front. I have some big cork boards in my office, and before I start a book, I'm doing this right now for my new novel, I plot scenes and I spread them out on the board, and then I'll work until I have about 60 or 70 scenes, and I work them through from everyone's perspective. Does this make sense for everyone?
Wow.
And there's a lot of tinkering, and
it's a lot of work.
Yeah, but you know, if you truly want to surprise people, I think I want to surprise people fairly. You know, I want them to be surprised by something that is in the character, but it hasn't been revealed. Not by something that I just made up on the fly. You know, I want it to be really part of the character that they're surprised by.
But the character isn't surprising you at all.
Rarely does a character surprise me.
Because a lot of people are surprised by their characters. I don't understand that. I don't understand this whole channeling. I'm just looking to understand it.
Some people I've talked to, some very successful writers, one I met last year who's a pretty big name writer, and he starts off, he has 3 points that are important for him. It's, you know, the beginning of Act 1, the beginning of Act 2, and then the climax. And he knows what those 3 things are, and he just jumps off and writes, which would be horrifying to me. You know, I like to know where I'm going.
Right.
You know, I like to have my directions. When I'm writing, I am writing a scene from notes that I've developed. I spent about 3 months sort of organizing a story because, you know, I want to know what impact I'm trying to make when I'm writing a scene.